I'm going to tell you the stories of the Viking women warriors that we know about. And then in part 2, we're going to look at the evidence for the existence of such women. Let's start by looking at what this ancient dude has to say about women fighting in the Viking Age. Saxo Grammaticus chronicled the ancient stories of Denmark, all the way back to the mythical King Dan, who is said to be the first of the Danes. In his history of Denmark, Saxo outlines some things that might not be evident to his 12th century Christian contemporaries. First, Saxo explains that there were in fact giants in ancient Denmark, because who else could have hauled these huge stones up on top of hills to build passage graves, which are known as jættestue, which means giants' rooms, as in rooms belonging to giants. Our giant believer Saxo also finds the necessity to clarify one other thing. Back then, there were indeed women among Danes who dressed themselves like men and devoted almost all of their time to the pursuit of war. They tasted blood instead of kisses. Their hands wielded weapons instead of weaving. They preferred to kill than to bed. These fighting women are called shield maidens. The first time Saxo tells us about a female warrior, a shield maiden, is in the story of Fridlev. Saxo tells us of a man, Vyrvi, who won further renown for himself by killing the famed shield maiden Rusla and her 5 warriors. The shield maiden Rusla was considered a great adversary, but Saxo tells us little more about her. But don't worry, there are more shield maidens to come. Next comes Sela, sister to King Ko of Norway. Sela was just as fierce in terms of warfare and Viking fare as the king. He was hunted and killed by Harvendel of Denmark, who also killed her brother. But again, Saxo keeps her narrative short. It's in the story of Sigga that we finally stop to properly meet a shield maiden. Her name is Alvile, and Saxo tells us that she exchanged her womanly dress for a man's garments, transforming from a timid girl to harsh Viking, and went on raids with similarly minded girls. When Alvile and her fighting girls come across a group of men mourning the recent death of their chieftain, the men promptly select Alvile to be their new chieftain. Alvile grew a whole fleet of followers, and then came the decisive battle that changed her destiny. For although Saxo tells us a lot about Alvile, this is not her story. This is the story of the son of the king, Alf. Back in the day, before Alvile put on a man's garments, she was locked in her room, surrounded by a snake or dragon-like creature. The person who could slay the beast would win Alvile's hand in marriage, but anyone who tried and failed, they would be beheaded, and the head would be put on a pole at the edge of the property. Alf, the son of the king, heard about this and thought, this is a great adventure, and set straight off. Alf had a plan. He drenched his clothes in blood so that they smelled and would really get the beast wild, and as soon as he entered the property, the beast sprang out at him. Alf took a hot iron and stuck it into the mouth of the beast, and then followed up with a spear. But when Alf demanded the woman's hand in marriage, her father, the king of Goodland, said that it would be up to her to decide. Alvile was quite interested in Alf, but her mother didn't think that they were a good match and convinced Alvile to say no to the proposal. Soon after, Alvile put on a man's garments and left to raid. After slaying the beast and being refused marriage, the son of the king, Alf, journeys on. Eventually, he comes upon a fleet and a battle ensues. Alf is quite surprised by the slim figures of his adversaries, and eventually he manages to wrench the helmet off of their leader and discovers that she is a woman. And not only is she a woman, it's Alvile who refused his proposal of marriage. This time the two of them do get married and have the daughter Gyriде. Gyride ends up being the only heir to her grandfather's kingdom and becomes the ruler. Early on, a man by the name of Halfdan proposes to her, but Gyride says that she can't possibly marry someone of lower status. Halfdan asks her to wait for him until he amasses a great reputation that she won't possibly be able to refuse. And Gyride agrees. She ruled for a long time, deflecting proposal after proposal after proposal. But eventually, word reached Gyride that Halfdan had been slayed. Her advisors convince her to marry someone else, and hearing this, Halfdan rushes to her side. He slays her new husband, and they get married. They get the son Harald, but during all of this time, the kingdom has fallen to unrest. To regain full rule over their kingdom, the family goes to war. Not just Halfdan and Harald, Gyride took up arms as once her mother had done and shielded her son from certain death on the battlefield. No more are we told about her, but in the end, Gyrid did prove to be a true shield maiden like her mother. Some years later, Harald Hilletan became king, and in the stories about him, we meet several fighting women. First, we have Stikla and Rusla, yes, another Rusla, who went up against King Olaf of Sweden to expand the lands that they ruled over. King Harald Hilletan is furious that these women are getting involved, and he disguises himself and goes out to find them. He kills them both and refuses to take any of the promised rewards for their deaths, which means that there were bounties on their heads. The worth of these two shield maidens was acknowledged not just by the price on their heads, but by the fact that Harald later had two ports named after them. But Rusla and Stikla are not just known from Saxo Grammaticus' retellings. They appear in the Irish annals, specifically in the War of the Irish with the foreigners. There Rusla is known as Ingen White, or the Red Maiden. She is presented as the commander of one of the fleets that participated in the Battle of Cloantab outside Dublin, a battle between Biro Borum, King of Ireland, and a united Northern Irish fleet. Thousands of people, perhaps even tens of thousands of people, died in this epic battle. Among them were Eowyn and Rykard, sons of Rusla. Back to Denmark, where Harald Hilletan is still king, there was one last epic battle to be fought. In the Bråvalla battle, we meet a whole slew of shield maidens. Saxo begins the tale of the battle by telling us of all the great warriors who participated. Among these great warriors, Saxo tells us that the warriors of Lyra arrived under the command of Visna and Hil, who both had a man's courage in female bodies. Visna was the experienced and manly commander of the Venda army. Her warriors carried light blue shields and spears that they gave unto younger warriors so that they could run bare-fisted into battle. The feared and admired shield maiden Hil also commanded fierce warriors. Together, these two fierce shield maidens commanded the warriors on land. But in the heat of battle, Visna's right hand is hacked off. Meanwhile, on the same battlefield, the shield maiden Vebjörn fights with the same fire in her heart as Visna and Hil. Vebjörn slayed the giant Slåtten and roared after everyone else. That is when a warrior from Gotland shot an arrow that went straight through shield and chainmail and pierced through Vebjörn, killing her. Ultimately, the Danes were defeated, and this is the end of the rule of Harald Hilletan. Now, in the absence of a king, the Danes demanded that the living shield maiden Hil become their ruler. But Hil's rule didn't last long, because soon came a sneaky man by the name of Ole. Ole riled up people to believe that Hil should be overthrown for being a woman. Ole took over rule of Sealand, but Hil remained the ruler in Jutland. The men who had disposed Hil soon came to regret the decision when they saw how tyrannical Ole was as a ruler. And those same men were the ones who overthrew and eventually killed Ole. After Ole came his son Ormund, and in the story of Ormund we once more meet a shield maiden by the name of Rusla. This Rusla won great renown for herself and challenged her brother Trond for the land that he ruled over. She even challenged King Ormund. King Ormund sent his best men to deal with Rusla, but they were soon killed, and Rusla continued her quest not only to overtake all of the lands of her brother, but also all of Denmark and Norway. When she sailed to Denmark, she met defeat for the first time and escaped with a measly fleet of 30 ships. The ships were pursued by the King of Denmark, but Rusla won this next fight, and once more she escaped. The rulers of Denmark and Norway gathered together to come up with a plan to defeat this annoying shield maiden who kept challenging them. They ambushed Rusla and raided her ships, but Rusla rowed away with the last of her crew. When the Danes stopped pursuing her, she thought herself safe. But then, out there, the open ocean, her brother was waiting for her, and he became her banesman. I think what we can learn from this tale of the third Rusla is that if you intend to make a warrior out of your daughter, then name her Rusla. In the account of Ragnar Lodbrok, yes, that's Ragnar Lodbrok, we meet Lelgar. Ragnar, recently having been named King of Denmark, sailed to Norway where there was strong anti-women sentiment. The women associated with the recently killed King of Norway were put into brothels. Several of the women who had suffered abuse like this put on man's clothing and went to see Ragnar Lodbrok. There, they declared that they would rather die. Ragnar had sailed to Norway in order to avenge the injustice done to these women, but he did not particularly want to see them die just to uphold their own honor. But among these women was a shield maiden named Lelga, and Lelga carried a man's courage in her heart. Her free hair waved down her back and revealed to all that she was a woman. Yet, to the respect of men and women alike, she fought on the front lines. As soon as King Ragnar was successful in his campaign, he asked about the shield maiden who fought the front lines, because they all owed their victory to her. Ragnar proposed to her, and while Lelga didn't exactly say yes, she also didn't say no. But as soon as she got home, she placed a bear and a wolf outside her home to deter the eager King Ragnar. When King Ragnar arrived, he speared the bear and took the wolf by the throat, threw it aside, and that is how they spent their first night together. Oh, how romantic! Saxon is not the only one to tell us about female warriors in the Viking Age. We also have the sagas. In particular, let's look at the story of Herva and Herdrik. The daughter of Jarl Bjarmar gave birth to a daughter about whom it was said that the girl would not have the mind of a woman if she took after her father, who was in possession of a dwarf-forged sword called Tjurfing. The maternal grandfather to Angantyur's daughter Jarl Bjarmar took the child as his own, raised the girl in secret and called her Herva. But as Herva grew, she became a brave young girl who practiced archery and sword fighting and shield maneuvers much more ardently than she practiced sewing. She was big and strong, and she continued to grow taller. When she was restrained, she ran into the forest and killed people like a huntress killing game. When the Jarl heard of this, he had her brought home and restrained anew. And she did stay there for a little while. Shortly after, Herva disappeared. Alone, armed, and dressed like a man, she joined a crew of Vikings. She followed them for a while and began to call herself Hervad, and is henceforth referred to as a man, at least for a while. When the commander of the crew died, Hervad became the new commander. One time they anchored by Samsø and Hervad went into land, but none of the other men would follow. They said that no one dared stay there at night, because at night, up on that grave mound, a great fire raged. Hervad argued that they might find a lot of treasure up in those old grave mounds on the island. Hervad, unafraid, stepped right through the fire like it was smoke, all the way to the berserkers' graves. This was the resting place of Hervad's father. Here Hervad called forth the ghost of his father, Angantyr. Angantyr declares that he has never known a woman brave enough to pick up the ancient dwarf-forged sword. Hervad, however, insists on being treated like a man and eventually gains the dwarf-forged sword, Tjurfing. Then Hervad returns to the ships, but the ships are gone. In fact, during the night, the Vikings sleeping down on the ships were so afraid by the fire burning up on the grave mounds that they just rowed away in the middle of the night, leaving Hervad alone. So, Hervad joined another crew, and for a while, he had nothing more until Hervad turns up at Gudmund's place. There, Hervad changed name to Højvard and overwintered. One time, Gudmund was playing pieces and losing pretty badly, so Hervad stepped forward to help out and promptly changed the whole outlook of the game. But while Hervad was standing over the pieces, he left the sword unattended, and another man came to pick up Tjurfing. Seeing this, Hervad became so angry that he turned around, wrenched the sword from the man and stabbed him, killing him, and promptly left the hall. For a while afterwards, Hervad joined Viking raids until even that became boring. Then, finally, after all this time, returned home. Here, Hervad abandoned the manly garments and put on a woman's dress instead. Eventually, a son of Gudmund, Høfn, came to propose. They had 2 sons together, Angantyr and Heidrik. Heidrik eventually gains a daughter that he names after his mother. This Hervad, raised in England by a man named Orm. She was the most beautiful woman, but also big and strong like a man. When the Huns attacked, Hervad fought against them. Her group rode out, and there a bloody battle began. But the army of the Huns was too large. Hervad fell, with a handsome pile of warriors dead all around her. A true shield maiden and a strong woman, as we see them elsewhere in the sagas. There is no shortage of murderous women in the sagas, like Freydis from the Vinland sagas. Freydis is the daughter of Eric the Red, and like her brothers, she wants to go to North America. Native Americans attack the camp, but Freydis comes out furious and heavily pregnant, even more furious. She picks up a sword, bares her breast, slams the sword against her breast to scare the Native Americans away. And apparently it worked. There is no doubt that Freydis was a strong woman, but a shield maiden? I wouldn't say so. To me, she's among many strong women in the sagas who take matters into their own hands. Women like Blenda, who lured a whole band of warriors into a hall, got them drunk, and then stabbed them in their sleep. Or like Cyril, who did the same, but instead of stabbing them, she just set fire to the hall and let them all burn. And we have Auda. She was one of the 4 most important settlers in Iceland. Auda gets spun into drama when Guðrún has an affair with Auda's husband. Auda's husband divorces her because she wears a man's garments. Things don't go so well for the two lovers though, because as you've probably guessed, Auda is a pretty strong woman. She takes up weapons and writes to her former husband, and then she stabs him in both nipples. Yup. She's still not a shield maiden, but by Skadi she's strong. But Tilde, you might say, yes, the tales of Lelge and Skadi and Hervor are all extraordinary, but that's exactly it. They're unbelievable. I mean, Saxo believed in giants. You told us that. Well, yeah, that's a pretty good point. And that's why in part 2, we're going to look at all the evidence for and against the existence of real shield maidens. Here, you can learn about how Vikings really did keep bears and wolves like the ones Lelge put outside her house. Click here for part 2, and if you want writing advice, it's down here.